Ah, Godzilla. What is it about Japanese men in rubber suits beating the crap out of each other that we love so much? The entire kaiju genre is so niche, yet it still is iconic and popular all around the world. And at the forefront of it all, there's Godzilla, the king of the monsters, and the most famous giant monster in the entire world. Yes, even more so than King Kong. I mean, even Hideo Kojima himself is a big Godzilla fan. That's pretty much an unofficial seal of quality right there. Would you question Kojima's opinions? There are over 30 Godzilla movies in existence, with even more in production right now. I've been a fan of his films for a very long time, something that is very obvious if you follow my videos. Guys, my entire YouTube channel is named after a Godzilla monster, it was pretty obvious. After making a few Godzilla videos in the past, I am here today to finally tackle the big one that my fans have been asking me to do for a very long time. My top 15 best Godzilla movies. Like I said before, there are so many Godzilla films to choose from, so I am bound to leave some good ones out. This list was very hard to make, but I think you will be satisfied with the final product. And like always, feel free to tell me what are your favorite Godzilla films in the comments. Heck, even if you've never seen one of his movies, stick around. Maybe you will get interested in watching one of these. And I hope you enjoyed this video whether you're a fan of Godzilla or not, because this is a very special one for me. Anyways, let's get started. Destroy all monsters. This was originally going to be the final Godzilla movie back in 1968, and it shows because it features almost every Godzilla monster that had appeared in a film before. Godzilla, Rodan, Anguirus, Mothra, Manda, Kumonga, Minilla, even Gorosaurus gets his chance to shine. But, as epic as this sounds, this movie is not as good as I was hoping. Destroy All Monsters only shines during its first and final acts. I enjoyed the opening with the peaceful Monsterland and how the aliens brainwash the kaijus to make them destroy cities all over the world. And the end is also so fun, with all the monsters joining forces to fight against King Ghidorah in one of the most memorable and devastating monster brawls of the entire franchise. Just so awesome. But sadly, the middle part of Destroy All Monsters is just boring. It's about humans trying to stop aliens from using their monsters, and to be honest, I forgot what happened because I lost interest. The plot doesn't go anywhere and it takes a while to get to the good stuff, so I had to keep this one very low on the list. But trust me, it's worth to watch the entire thing just for that final scene of the monsters against King Ghidorah. And if you think the concept of several kaijus destroying the entire world is really cool, don't worry, we are just getting started. Godzilla vs Biollante. I will say this during this video a lot, but this movie may be one of the weirdest yet most creative Godzilla movies. To be completely honest, there are two main reasons the fanbase loves Godzilla vs Biollante so much. The first one is the more emotional and human plot. Dr. Shiragami is a scientist experimenting on Godzilla's cells who combines the kaiju's DNA with Rose's and even the genes of his dead daughter, Erika, who was killed by a group of terrorists who wanted to steal the Godzilla cells. The product of this experiment is a weird and freaky kaiju called Biollante. There's a lot of political debate in this movie and even some discussion about the ethics of combining the DNA of living beings. It's really interesting to see humans discussing all of this stuff in a Godzilla movie. Dr. Shiragami's emotional struggle with the death of his daughter is particularly engaging. Biollante is the second reason people love this movie so much. She is very different from your usual kaiju, a giant Godzilla, woman and plant hybrid with lots of tentacles, acid that she spits from her mouth, and a blood-curdling roar. Too bad she doesn't really appear that much in the film. Hell, Dr. Shiragami also doesn't appear all that much either. Seriously, Biollante must have less screen time in her movie than Godzilla in the 2014 American movie. But every time she appears, it's so worth it. and she has some raw and devastating clashes against Godzilla. This movie could have been called Godzilla vs Super X2 featuring Biollante, because that's what Godzilla fights during most of the film, this brand new airship designed to kill him. It's far from boring, just a tad disappointing. The coolest part of the movie though must be the countdown to Godzilla's eruption from the volcano. It's a cool little detail and it builds a lot of tension. This is a weird one that explores a few new elements for the franchise, but Godzilla vs Biollante may be one of the most beautiful and artistic Godzilla movies out there. Personally, I love it just for giving us a monster as amazing as Biollante. King Kong vs Godzilla. Oh yeah, it's the crossover between two of the most iconic giant monsters in film history. It is as awesome as you imagine it. Well, sort of. To be brutally honest, this feels more of a King Kong movie with Godzilla in it. You got all your classic King Kong elements. The tropical island, the natives who worship him, the businessman who gets the ape out of the island, and the lady he falls for. At one point, they realize King Kong is the only thing that can put a stop to Godzilla's destruction, so they make them fight. So, how do they make the monsters meet at the same place? Well, they get King Kong drunk and fly him there with giant balloons, of course. Oh, it's majestic. Of course that King Kong had to be scaled up and given new electric powers so he could actually stand a chance against Godzilla, and the final battle between them is chaotically fun. You got two of the biggest film icons beating the crap out of each other. It's very fun. And they don't stop fighting just because Godzilla's and King Kong's mothers are called Martha. Am I right? Contrary to popular belief, King Kong technically wins this fight in every single version of this movie, but it can be assumed that Godzilla just escaped by swimming underwater, so it's all good, I am not salty that Godzilla didn't win. Okay, maybe I am a bit salty. This one is still low on the list because it has more of a focus on King Kong rather than Godzilla, which can be underwhelming for some people. And yeah, the special effects and acting are so cheesy, but regardless of that, it's a very entertaining film, a classic of the Godzilla series and one of the first crossovers in movie history. They are planning on making an American remake of this crossover in 2020, and I am super excited to see how that turns out. I just hope they stick with the balloon sim. You can't get rid of that one, it's wonderful. Godzilla 2000. I don't think people give this movie enough credit. This one came out in 1999, a year after the infamous and awful American Godzilla movie. Toho made this film not only to clean Godzilla's prestigious reputation, but also to show the United States how you make a new Godzilla reboot, and they succeeded with flying colors. Seriously, Godzilla 2000 is everything 1998's Godzilla wasn't. He has a brand new design that changed up a few elements, but they still looked and felt like Godzilla. The story about an alien monster who feeds off energy and eventually tries to transform into Godzilla himself feels more western to me, and is actually quite terrifying and intense. They even explore the idea of Godzilla's DNA being used for good because of its regenerating abilities. It's entertaining and has quality to it, way better than the American movie from the year before. At least they got it right 16 years later. Side note, I really like Godzilla 2014 and it's definitely a honorable mention for this list. Like I said before, Godzilla himself looks freaking amazing, Orga is a creative and intimidating foe, the fight between them is really epic with a terrific finisher, and even the music score of this movie gives me goosebumps. It didn't make the top 10 because the human characters are cliched and not too memorable, some experimental CGI shots age horribly, and the pacing can be too slow for some people. But it still was a great comeback for the real Godzilla. Who knows what would have happened to the franchise if Toho didn't step in to save it with this amazing flick. Godzilla 2000 deserves a spot on here just for that. I do have a soft spot for this movie, mainly because Toho was so desperate to show the entire world who Godzilla really was that they distributed it all over the world, including Argentina, so it's one of the very few Godzilla movies that was shown in theaters over here, and the only one I can occasionally catch on TV. Well, the only one if you don't count...
That's a lot of fish.
No. Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla. We kaiju fans love our robot doppelgangers, and the most beloved one in the Godzilla franchise was introduced in this movie. The concept is simple. Alien gorillas create a mechanical version of Godzilla in order to conquer the world. Not a very original story, I know. And yes, I did say alien gorillas. It is as goofy as it sounds. While this film has yet another alien invasion plot, which were overused as heck at this point in the series, the monster itself is what makes the movie for me. The original Mechagodzilla looks downright terrifying.
That's fucking metal as fuck, dude!
And I think the idea of disguising it as Godzilla in order to confuse people and even other monsters is very clever. We even get a badass Godzilla vs Godzilla battle in the middle of a burning city, the only time we got to see the king of the monsters fighting himself. The final battle between them is even more devastating. Mechagodzilla not only looks like a threat, but it actually is one because it has a huge arsenal of weapons that kick Godzilla's ass. It makes him bleed and all. It's one of the bloodiest battles in the franchise. Godzilla eventually wins at the end, of course, because he got magnetic powers out of a lightning storm. Hey, I never said he won fairly, but at least he tore Mechagodzilla's head off. That's pretty neat. Overall, Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla, it's a classic with introduction of a great new enemy and some amazing action, even if the plot is not very original. It keeps itself entertaining because of how cheesy everything is. Even if the main character gets saved by Interpol like what, 3 times? Come on now! My main problem with this movie is Godzilla's ally, King Caesar. He is cool, yeah, but they spent way too much time on his origin and trying to summon him with a song that goes on for way too long, only for him to do almost nothing and get wrecked by Mechagodzilla at the end. It felt like a waste of time.
Hey, we make a pretty great team. You were absolutely no help whatsoever.
Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. This is a very important movie for the entire kaiju subgenre because of 2 big reasons. It introduced Godzilla's most iconic enemy, King Ghidorah, and it created the monster brawl in an epic 3-against-1 final battle. First of all, King Ghidorah is actually my favorite kaiju right next to Godzilla, and this movie has my favorite origin story for him. He is this badass space dragon with 3 heads that can shoot lightning beams from his mouth, and he can destroy entire worlds. Nobody controls him. More movies should have stuck with this origin story for Ghidorah. And who will stop King Ghidorah? Not just Godzilla, but also Rodan and Mothra. Keep in mind that these 3 monsters already had movies of their own before this one, and they team up in order to defeat a bigger alien threat. Yeah, this was one of the first movies, aside from the classic Universal monsters, that explored the concept of a shared cinematic universe. That's pretty revolutionary. Rodan and Godzilla don't get along at first and they ensue in a crazy and hilarious fight. After Mothra convinces them to team up, the 3 of them fight against King Ghidorah in an even bigger and crazier fight. As it is with all the Godzilla movies of the Showa era, the effects and acting are cheesy but charismatic at the same time. Ghidorah the three-headed monster was prominent because of the shift in tone for the series. While previous films were darker in tone, this one was more colorful and even had some scenes of comedy between the monsters. In this case, it's fine because it never goes overboard with its silliness like future movies of the franchise, if you know what I mean. The only really big flaw in this film is the human side of the plot. I mean, it's unique and interesting. The princess of a country is possessed by a Venusian that warns her that King Ghidorah is coming to Earth. She also has to escape some assassins sent by her enemy country, but sadly the plot gets pretty slow and boring at times. King Ghidorah and the other monsters are the real star of the movie and the most entertaining parts of it. Oh, and just like King Kong vs Godzilla, they are actually making an American remake of this movie in the form of the sequel to the 2014 American Godzilla movie. Just Imagine Mothra, Rodan and Godzilla fighting against King Ghidorah with modern visual effects. Oh, that's going to be so awesome. I think I'm going to pass out. Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla 2. I do prefer the original Mechagodzilla over the second one in terms of design and backstory, but I think this one managed to improve on the quality of its own movie. Humans have created a weapon to defend themselves against Godzilla, a mechanic doppelganger of the monster that they can control from the inside. A big part of this film is centered around the humans controlling Mechagodzilla and fighting Godzilla, so half of the human element keeps itself interesting with that. Just like the original robot, Mechagodzilla 2 fights unrelentlessly and uses its entire futuristic arsenal against the king of the monsters. It's just as amazing and devastating as its predecessor. Rodan is also in this movie. His redesign is one of the most solid in the entire series, and he actually plays a vital role in this film. He fights against Godzilla because of an egg that ends up having a baby Godzilla inside of it. The baby is used by the people to find out more about Godzilla, thus expanding the mythos of the kaiju, which is always pretty interesting. The humans find out that Godzilla has a weak spot, a second brain, in his butt. Of course it's in his butt, where else would it be? Thanks a lot, Japan. During the final battle, Mechagodzilla 2 transforms into Super Mechagodzilla. Yes, it is as awesome as it sounds, and uses this information to defeat Godzilla. Here is where Rodan comes in. Spoiler alert for a movie that is over 20 years old. He sacrifices himself in order to give more power to Godzilla so he can kick some metal ass. And the fight itself is a bit disappointing. The monsters don't move all that much and they relied on shooting each other a lot. I guess these new suits were expensive. The fights are cool, don't get me wrong, with some good music to boot, but yeah, that was underwhelming. To wrap it up, Godzilla vs Mechagodzilla 2 may not be a movie with deep themes or revolutionary special effects, but it is a well-made kaiju flick with memorable monsters, badass action, some good moments, and an engaging story. And really, what else do you need from a Godzilla movie? Shin Godzilla. Indeed, the most recent Godzilla movie is on my list. I will try not to spoil it, but feel free to click the annotation on screen in case you don't wanna know anything about it before watching it. I think this is the only Godzilla movie that can match the original from 1954 when it comes to its dark and serious tone. It's kind of tragically beautiful. Basically, this is a reboot slash reimagining of the original movie, since Shin Godzilla here also represents different tragedies Japan had to endure during its history. There's a lot of political discussion here, which is not new to the franchise, but those other movies are old. This one is set on modern day Japan, so it's super interesting to me to see Japanese politicians trying to destroy the monster in their current situation, their current relationship with the US, and even new technologies and social media. I am not Japanese, but I heard Shin Godzilla has a lot of satirical commentary on current Japanese politics and bureaucracy. But let's talk about the monster. This is definitely the weirdest incarnation of Godzilla. His origin is a bit different and he actually starts off as a smaller form that keeps on adapting and evolving, similar to Destroya or Ghidorah. Yes, Godzilla is basically a Pokemon in this one. It kind of makes me wish that they made a Godzilla Go-Up. That would be pretty cool. And the design of his final form looks so creepy. To be honest, this movie actually made me feel scared of Godzilla at times. That's a new one for me. Without spoiling too much, I can say that he gets a few new powers in this movie that made him so unpredictable and incredibly destructive. These powers and the forms I mentioned were a fresh new take on the King of the Monsters that I personally think work quite well, even if he can be a tad goofy at times. The cinematography is really impressive. The special effects are unique since they blend Sweetmation with CGI, and the music score is just so ominous that it feels apocalyptic at times, gives me goosebumps just by listening to it. Sadly, Shin Godzilla is not as perfect as I was hoping. Like I said before, there's a lot of political talk in this movie, so yeah, it can get boring at times. The characters are very bland too, well, with the exception of Kayoko Patterson. She's my new wife, I love her. And even if they had a lot of unique new ideas, it was disappointing to see that this movie still falls into a lot of the typical Godzilla cliches that prevent the plot from being truly creative. Aside from these flaws, Shin Godzilla is an interesting, dark and epic modern Godzilla movie that you should check out if you have the chance. What else could we expect from a movie by the creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion, am I right? I actually haven't seen Evangelion yet, I just thought I had to mention that. Yep. This project ended up being way too big for me to do in just one video, so I decided to split it in 2 parts so it's easier for me to make it and easier for you to watch it. If you are from the future and part 2 is already done, click the annotation on screen or in the description to watch it. And if it's not done yet, you can subscribe and stay tuned until it comes out in the next few days. Thank you for watching.